Gabriella Costa had certainly faced difficult clients before. Nico's family, who had arrived 3 generations ago from a sun-baked corner of Sicily, had subsequently constructed an empire that included a thriving, unquestionably legitimate chain of upscale Italian restaurants, and other considerably less legitimate ventures that Gabby had quickly learned were best left unmentioned and unasked about. She had first met Nico 6 months earlier when her boutique design firm had been retained to execute a comprehensive rebrand of his restaurant group. He'd walked into the initial presentation impeccably dressed in an expensive, dark suit. His eyes dark and piercing, missing absolutely nothing. He carried an inherent air of uncompromising authority that instantly compelled everyone in the conference room to straighten their spines and momentarily forget how to breathe. Gabby had coolly presented her concepts. A modern Italian aesthetic that meticulously honored decades of tradition while simultaneously appealing to the discerning, contemporary Boston diner. He had asked pointed questions, challenged her strategic choices with brutal efficiency, and then, after scrutinizing every detail, approved the entire proposal with a single, non-negotiable nod. Immediately following the presentation, he had asked her to dinner. She had declined instantly, citing professional boundaries, potential conflict of interest, and all the logical reasons a smart, ambitious woman should. 2 weeks later, after the rebrand launched to universally rave reviews and her contract was officially complete, he had asked again. This time she had said yes. 6 months later, she was thoroughly in love with a man whose sprawling business interests extended far beyond the simple domains of marinara sauce and fresh pasta. And she was now on the cusp of meeting the grandmother who, by all accounts, specialized in universal loathing. The house itself was imposing, warm brick, framed by glowing, amber windows, the kind of historic residence that had sheltered and witnessed generations of Moretti life. Nico led her inside without the formality of knocking, and they were instantly engulfed by a tidal wave of noise and aroma. Nico, final meant, finally. His mother, Francesca, materialized through the crowd, effortlessly elegant in a black tailored dress, her dark hair styled into an immaculate sculpture. And you brought Gabriella. Come, come. Everyone is waiting, and the sauce is perfect. The dining room was magnificent chaos. At least 20 people were crowded around a massive, polished mahogany table that literally groaned under the weight of platters piled high with food. Antipasti, mountains of fresh pasta, roasted meats, braised vegetables, and crusty fresh bread. Everyone was talking simultaneously, switching rapidly between rapid-fire Italian and emphatic English, gesturing wildly with wine glasses, punctuated by rolling, unrestrained laughter. Nico moved through the crowd, making introductions. His father, Antonio, a man who projected quiet, commanding solidity. His brother Marco and his wife Angela. His sister Gianna and her seemingly bewildered husband. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and small children darting perilously between the chair legs. And then, at the head of the table, in a large chair that functioned less as furniture and more as a gilded throne, sat Nonna Lucia. She was physically tiny, likely no more than 5 feet tall, but she radiated an absolute, unassailable authority that filled the entire room. Her snow-white hair was pulled back into a perfect, severe bun. Her sharp, dark eyes were penetrating, missing nothing. She was elegantly dressed in a rich burgundy velvet dress, accessorized only by a heavy, ornate gold cross resting regally at her throat. She looked at Gabby, her expression holding a silent, critical judgment that felt cold enough to instantly freeze the Chianti in their glasses. Nonna, Nico said, smoothly switching to fluent Italian, the language of reverence. This is Gabriella Costa. Gabby, my grandmother, Lucia Moretti. Gabby had meticulously rehearsed this moment. Show respect. Do not grovel. Good evening, Nonna. It is a true pleasure to meet you. Nonna's eyebrows rose barely a millimeter. You speak Italian. Yes, Nonna. My grandparents were from Napoli. They made absolutely sure I learned correctly. Napoli. Nonna offered a dismissive sniff. Not Sicily. No, Nonna. But they always told me that all roads lead to excellent food and a strong, unyielding family. regardless of which region you are fortunate enough to hail from. A momentary flicker of something, perhaps approval, perhaps sharp amusement, crossed Nonna's ancient face before it instantly settled back into neutral, clinical assessment. "Sit," Nonna commanded. "We will see if you are actually capable of handling a real Italian dinner." As the elaborate meal progressed, Gabby slowly realized that this was not, in fact, a culinary test of her appetite or palate. It was a rigorous, high-stakes examination of whether she could handle the family. Nonna launched a battery of pointed, deeply personal questions about Gabby's background, her family lineage, the specifics of her work, the exact town her grandparents had occupied in Italy, her father's profession, her adherence to Catholicism, and the deeply private question of whether or not she intended to bear children. "Nonna," Nico interjected, his voice carrying a distinct, strained warning. "That is enough. I am merely getting to know her," Nonna declared, turning those sharp eyes back onto Gabby. "My grandson has brought a girl home for the first time in 2 years. I am permitted to ask questions of consequence." "It's quite all right," Gabby insisted, meeting Nonna's unwavering gaze directly, refusing to look away or flinch. "Yes, my grandparents immigrated from Napoli in the 1950s. My father teaches history at Boston College. I was raised Catholic, though I regret that I don't attend Mass as frequently as I should. And no, I haven't decided about children yet. I am only 29 and currently focused on aggressively building my business." "At least you are honest," Nonna conceded, taking a slow, critical sip of wine. "Better than the last one, who simply told me what she pathetically thought I wanted to hear." "I don't lie to people I respect, Nonna," Gabby responded evenly, maintaining eye contact. "And I respect anyone who has managed to keep a family like this together for so many years." Something intangible shifted in Nonna's formidable expression. Not sudden warmth, but perhaps a minor, momentary thaw in the rigid permafrost of her disapproval. After the dishes were emptied, while the men retreated with espresso and glasses of potent grappa, Gabby joined the women in the massive, bustling kitchen to clear the monumental table. Francesca caught Gabby's hand in a quick, private gesture. "You did very well," she murmured quietly. "Lucia does not warm to people easily, ever. But you stood your ground without being disrespectful. That, Gabriella, means everything to her." "She is terrifying," Gabby admitted honestly. "She is protective," Francesca corrected, a slight smile touching her lips. "Nico is her oldest grandson, her favorite, though she would absolutely never admit that aloud. She needs to be utterly certain that whoever he chooses is worthy of him, worthy of us. And if I'm not?" Francesca's smile was knowing, steeped in long experience. "Then she will make absolutely sure you know it. But I truly don't think that is going to be a problem, Cara." Later, while she was washing delicate china side by side with Gianna, Gabby overheard Nonna's distinct, sharp voice drifting in from the other room. She was speaking in a rapid, deep Sicilian dialect to one of the older aunts. Gabby caught only fragmented phrases. Something about old photographs. Something concerning the old house. Something about essential things left behind when they first immigrated to America. "What is she talking about?" Gabby asked Gianna quietly. Gianna glanced toward the dining room entrance, then lowered her voice confidentially. "She does this sometimes, especially now, around the holidays. She gets intensely nostalgic about Sicily, about all the pieces of her life she had to leave behind when the family migrated in 1965. Gianna added. She was only 23 then, newly married to Nonno Giuseppe. They were only allowed to bring whatever could fit into 2 small suitcases total. "That must have been devastatingly hard," Gabby observed. "She never talks about it directly, but you can tell it weighs on her, especially as she gets older," Gianna said, rubbing a dish with extra force. "All those things she left behind that she knows she will never see again." Gianna paused, dropping her voice further. "Last Christmas, she actually cried for a moment, just when she thought no one was looking. Mom said she was holding an old, faded photograph of her mother's kitchen back in the village." Gabby silently filed that small, private detail away, not yet sure why it felt so profoundly important, but knowing instinctively that it was. The evening finally began to wind down around 10 o'clock. Nico found her in the kitchen, his strong hand settling familiarly on the small of her back. Ready for extraction? Your family is overwhelming, but truly wonderful. My family is an institution of sensory overload. He agreed, but his smile was soft, relieved. You survived Nonna. That is no small feat. She is not nearly as scary as you tried to make her sound. That, Bella, is because she likes you, he corrected gently. If she didn't, trust me, you would already be halfway home, probably plotting revenge. He pulled her close enough to whisper near her ear. She told my mother. She has good bones and a strong spirit. That, Nonna speak, is the absolute equivalent of glowing, full-scale approval. They made the long rounds, offering their formal goodbyes. When they reached Nonna, she was sitting in her massive chair by the front window, gazing out at the quiet, historic street with an expression Gabby couldn't quite decipher. A mixture of fatigue and deep contemplation. Buona notte, Nonna, Gabby said warmly. Asterisk grazie star. Nonna turned, studying her for a long, heavy moment. You will come back next Sunday. It was not remotely a question, but Gabby answered it anyway. I would like that very much, Nonna. Good. Nonna's hand came up, surprisingly quick and strong, and gripped Gabby's wrist firmly. My grandson is a good man. Stubborn, entirely too proud sometimes, but fundamentally good. You understand what that means, Gabriella? What his life truly entails. Gabby understood completely. Nonna was asking about far more than Nico's moral character or personality quirks. She was asking about the deep, often dangerous complexities of the Moretti name. Yes, Nonna, I understand. And you are not afraid? I am cautious, Nonna, but I am not afraid. Nonna studied her for another moment, her gaze penetrating, before releasing her wrist. Good. Fear is reserved for people who fail to understand that family protects family, no matter what business is involved. You understand this covenant? Yes. Then maybe you will do. Nonna waved her hand in a sudden, impatient dismissal, though her expression had softened marginally. Go, Nico. Drive carefully, Gabriella. I will see you next Sunday. In the car, Nico drove in silence for several blocks through the narrow streets before he finally spoke, letting out a long, heavy breath. She really, genuinely likes you. I have not seen her approve of anyone I've dated since. Well, ever, actually. He found her hand and laced their fingers together. She wasn't just protecting me tonight. She was testing you. And you passed. That conversation about understanding what my life is. That was her very subtle way of asking if you can truly handle all of it. The complicated business, the intense family expectations, the inherent dangers. He squeezed her hand. She needed to know if you are in this for the long haul, for real, or if you will run the moment things become complicated or potentially dangerous. I am not running. Good. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles reverently. Because I am profoundly in love with you, Gabby, and my family. Especially Nonna. They need to know you are permanent. That this is serious. It is serious, she confirmed, turning to face him in the dim dashboard light. I love you too, Nico. Your family, your business, all of it. I'm not going anywhere. Even if Nonna starts asking increasingly intrusive questions about the exact timeline for grandchildren. Even then, she smiled. Though I might start lying about my frequency of attending Mass. The following Sunday, Gabby returned to the Moretti house. And the Sunday after that. By the fourth consecutive Sunday, Nonna had completely stopped grilling her with invasive questions and had begun soliciting her opinion on mundane family matters, like the proper placement of the new sectional sofa. By the sixth Sunday, Gabby was actually helping to cook. It was a particularly cold Sunday in November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, when Gabby overheard the quiet conversation that would ultimately change everything. She was deep in the kitchen with Francesca and Gianna, diligently making pasta from scratch, while Nonna, seated strategically in her chair, directed the proceedings like a seasoned general commanding frontline troops. The sounds of conversation and robust laughter from the men drifted in through the open dining room doorway. Not too thin, Nonna instructed sharply, watching Gabby work the rich, silky pasta dough. It requires body, not like paper, like silk. Capisci? Yes, Nonna. Gianna, add more flour. Your dough is too wet, Francesca, and the sauce needs more basil. I can detect the lack of aroma from here. The women exchanged brief, amused glances but immediately obeyed without a single question. This was Nonna's kitchen. Nonna's rules were absolute law. Gabby? Nonna said suddenly, her voice cutting through the noise. Come here. Let me see your hands. Gabby went instantly, holding out her flour-dusted hands. Nonna took them in her own surprisingly strong grip, turning them over, meticulously studying her palms and fingers. Good hands, she pronounced finally. Strong but gentle. You know how to work. That is important. She released Gabby's hands. My mother had hands like this. She could roll pasta so fine you could almost see through it, yet they were strong enough to carry a sick goat up a mountain path when necessary. It was the first time Gabby had ever heard Nonna mention her mother directly. Gabby kept her voice quiet, appropriately respectful. She sounds like a truly remarkable woman. She was, Nonna whispered, her expression suddenly distant, seeing a scene 40 years in the past. She taught me everything. How to cook, how to keep a clean house, how to find the inner strength when life demands it. When we finally left Sicily, she gave me her recipes. Not written down, we had no time for that, and besides, her own mother never wrote them down either. Passed from mother to daughter, always spoken aloud, learned only by relentless doing. Francesca had stopped kneading her dough, listening carefully. Gianna too. This was clearly rare. Nonna sharing such profound, vulnerable memories. She did have one book, though, Nonna continued, still speaking in that hollow, distant voice. An old book. Her mother's mother had written in it. Not cooking recipes, but other things. Herbal remedies, essential household wisdom, family history that stretched back generations. My Nonna had written in it. My mother had written in it. It was meant to pass to me and then to my own daughters. Her hand automatically touched the heavy gold cross at her throat. We left it behind, she finished quietly. We had to. We could only bring what fit into those 2 suitcases. I truly believed we would go back soon, visit, and bring it with us eventually. But Nonna's work kept him anchored here. And then the years passed. She trailed off, and for a fleeting moment, Gabby saw the young woman Nonna had been, abandoning her ancestral home with nothing but desperate hope. The village is probably gone now, Nonna said softly. Most of the young people left, moved to the big cities. The old house fell into utter ruin, I am sure. And the book. She shook her head with a weary finality. It has been 60 years. These precious things do not survive the passage of time. What village, Nonna? Gabby asked gently. Savoca, in the rugged hills high above Taormina. You have probably never heard of such a remote place. But Gabby had. Savoca, the tiny, ancient medieval village where parts of The Godfather had been famously filmed. Remote, achingly beautiful, perched precariously on a hilltop, offering staggering views of Mount Etna and the distant sea. The book, Gabby pressed carefully. Do you remember exactly what it looked like? Brown leather, Nonna described, gesturing with her hands, indicating something roughly the size of a substantial hardcover novel. It had a dark water stain on the corner from when my Nonna dropped it in the rain and dried it too quickly by the fire. My mother's name was written inside the front cover. Caterina Russo. My Nonna's name, Sophia Russo. And before that, names I never knew going back to the 1800s. Francesca laid a gentle hand on Nonna's shoulder. Mama, you don't have to talk about this. I am old, Nonna said simply without inflection. I contemplate these things often now. What is truly lost? What can possibly be found again? That book was my history, my daughter's history, and it is gone. The conversation smoothly moved on to other, more immediate topics, but Gabby could not shake the image. A family history book left behind in a desperate rush 60 years ago. A foundational piece of history, potentially sitting in some decaying house in a tiny Sicilian hill village. Gone, Nonna had stated. These things don't survive. But what if it had? That night, lying wide awake in Nico's luxurious penthouse apartment, Gabby found herself unable to sleep. She kept picturing Nonna's expression when she recounted the loss of the book, the deep longing, the profound sense of loss, the resigned acceptance. "You are thinking entirely too loudly," Nico murmured, his arm tightening possessively around her waist. "What is wrong? Is your Nonna's book, the one she left behind in Sicily? You were actually listening to that old story?" He pressed a light kiss to her shoulder. "She brings it up sometimes, particularly around the holidays. I think it reminds her of her mother, her childhood, everything she had to leave behind." "Do you truly believe it could still exist?" Nico was quiet for a long moment, a practical man assessing an impractical hypothesis. "It has been 60 years, Bella. The house is probably rubble now. Even if the structure miraculously stands, anyone could have taken the book, thrown it away, or burned it for heat. The chances of it surviving are infinitesimally small. But, Gabby thought stubbornly, not impossible." He turned her to face him, his dark eyes searching hers in the dim pre-dawn light. "What are you seriously considering?" "Christmas is in exactly 7 weeks," she murmured. "What if I could find it?" "Gabby." His voice was gentle, weighted with realism. "Savoca is tiny, remote. The house is probably demolished. The book is likely destroyed. And even if, by some miracle, it survived all that, how would you find it? How would you even determine which ruined house was theirs?" "I don't know the specifics yet," she admitted. "But I absolutely have to try." She gently touched his face, recognizing the thread of concern etched in his expression. "Your Nonna has everything a person could want. Family, deep respect, financial security. But she lost this single, fundamental piece of her history, and she will never recover it unless someone actively tries. What if I could give that back to her? What if I could bring her mother's book home?" "It's impossible." "Probably," Gabby conceded. "But what if it isn't?" Nico stared at her for a long, quiet moment. Then, his expression shifted, melting into something that looked like profound admiration. "You are serious about this?" "I am completely serious. You barely know her. She has been ruthlessly hard on you, testing you every single week. And now you want to fly across an ocean to Sicily and undertake a massive search for a book that likely disintegrated decades ago, just to give her something she lost 60 years ago." "Yes." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, a kiss of pure affirmation. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with powerful emotion. "This is exactly why I love you, Gabriella. This right here. Most people wouldn't care enough to try. Most people would dismiss this as crazy or sentimental." "It is probably crazy," Gabby admitted, a slight tremor in her voice. "It is probably impossible," Nico agreed. "But if anyone possesses the sheer will to do it, it's you. And if you need help, contacts in Sicily, specialized money, resources, anything at all, you tell me. My family has deep connections there. I can make calls. I can smooth the way. I don't even know where to begin my search. Start with research. Find the old village records. Find out if anyone still lives there who might faintly remember Nonna's family, the Russos. Find out if the house still stands." His hand cradled her face, serious now. "And Gabby, whatever you do, do not tell Nonna. If you fail to find it, I don't want her to know you even tried. She would feel guilty that you went to all that effort. It is infinitely better to surprise her if you succeed than to deeply disappoint her if you fail." Gabby nodded, understanding the delicate emotional logic. "Christmas Eve. If I can find it, I will give it to her at Christmas Eve dinner. That gives you 6 weeks. Then I had better start immediately." The very next morning, Gabby began her intense research. Savoca, Sicily. Population less than 2,000. A medieval village perfectly preserved like a fragile time capsule, perched on a steep hilltop in the Peloritani Mountains, primarily famous for its role in the Godfather films, otherwise largely bypassed and forgotten by the modern world. She found online photographs, Narrow, worn cobblestone streets, ancient stone houses, the ruined Norman castle overlooking the valley. She located tourist information, historical records, and even a few academic papers about preservation efforts, but she found nothing specific about individual families who had lived there in the 1960s. Nothing about a house belonging to the Russos. Nothing about a book. She realized she would simply have to go there herself. The main problem was timing. Thanksgiving was in 2 short weeks. She had critical client commitments, strict deadlines, and major projects that absolutely could not be delayed. She couldn't simply vanish to Sicily for a week without completely derailing her entire business. Unless she could manage to do both simultaneously. Gabby immediately scrutinized her calendar, made several rapid-fire calculations, and began aggressively rearranging meetings. She could push 2 key deadlines to early December. She could work remotely for the duration of the trip, and she could schedule all client calls around the 7-hour time difference. She could make this impossible feat work. By Sunday dinner the following week, Gabby had finalized her plan. She said nothing to Nonna, nothing to the extended family. But when she and Nico left that night, she told him the decision. I'm going to Sicily the week after Thanksgiving. I will be gone for 5 days. His eyebrows shot up. You are actually serious about this? Completely serious. I have already booked the flights. I'll land in Catania, drive directly to Savoca, and spend 3 concentrated days searching. If I can't locate anything conclusive in 3 days, I'll come straight home. But I absolutely have to try. Nico pulled her close, marveling at her tenacity. You are utterly incredible. You know that? I am probably insane. That too, he agreed, kissing her forehead tenderly. But I am making some calls. I have a cousin in Taormina, not far from Savoca. He knows people, knows the area implicitly. I will tell him you are coming. I will ask him to help in any way possible. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he warned. Thank me when you are safely home, with or without that book. His arms tightened around her waist, protective and insistent. And Gabby, be extremely careful. Rural Sicily is stunningly beautiful but intensely isolated. Stick to the areas near the town center. Do not wander alone, and call me every single day. Promise. I am serious. Every day. I need to know you are safe and accounted for. She heard the deep layer of worry beneath his command, the fear he would never allow himself to fully voice. His world, she knew, was dangerous in ways that most people failed to comprehend. And sending her alone to a foreign, albeit relatively safe, country clearly made him desperately nervous. Every day, she promised. Morning and night, if it will make you feel better. It will. The week of Thanksgiving arrived and vanished in a blur of mandatory family dinners, pressing client deadlines, and final, frantic preparations. Gabby said nothing to the Morettas about her impending journey, telling them only that she would be visiting family out of state for a few days after the holiday. Nonna studied her intently at Thanksgiving dinner with those sharp, probing eyes, but she remained silent. Whatever the formidable matriarch suspected, she kept it entirely to herself. The Monday after Thanksgiving, Gabby boarded a transatlantic plane bound for Sicily with nothing but a carry-on suitcase, a small, faded photograph of Nonna from the 1960s, and the fragile hope that 60 years of time and neglect hadn't completely destroyed what she was desperately searching for. Nico was waiting for her call. The final text exchange flashed across the screen just as the jet's engines roared to life, pushing her back into the worn seat. Come back safe. I love you. Gabby felt a tightening in her chest, the reality of the distance hitting her. She quickly tapped out her reply. I will. I love you too. The digital connection severed as she powered down the device, the solitude immediate and encompassing. Her gaze fixed on the darkening window, the city lights shrinking below. The task ahead felt monumental, almost ludicrous. Locate a single handwritten book in one tiny, forgotten village, 60 years after it was hastily abandoned. Finding a needle in a historical haystack, she thought, a wry smile touching her lips. How hard, really, could something that impossible prove to be? The late November air in Sicily struck Gabby immediately. A sharper, cooler breath than she had anticipated. She disembarked in Catania beneath a heavy curtain of gray sky, greeted by a persistent wind carrying the sharp, briny tang of the Ionian Sea mingled unmistakably with the sulphurous scent of volcanic soil from Mount Etna. Nico's cousin, Luca, was waiting, a beacon of familial warmth amid the chaos of the arrivals hall. A man in his mid-40s, Luca possessed an effortlessly friendly smile and spoke English seasoned generously with the rich, melodic cadence of a heavy Sicilian accent. "So, you are the American," he said, taking her suitcase and effortlessly hoisting it into the trunk of his compact car, who was trying to find Nonna Lucia's lost book. He paused, looking at her over the car roof. "Nico told me about your search. I think you are crazy, truly crazy, but I must admit, I admire the dedication." Gabby chuckled, pulling her jacket tighter. "Everyone keeps telling me I'm crazy, which only confirms that I probably am." Luca's expression, though, softened into something genuinely kind. "You must understand the reality, Gabriella. The house itself might not even be standing anymore. And even if it is, 60 years is more than a lifetime in the life of objects. Things are misplaced, destroyed by weather, sometimes just tossed away." "I know," Gabby admitted, the optimism momentarily tempered by his stark realism. "But I still have to try. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't." The journey to Savoca consumed a winding, beautiful hour. They climbed steadily, the road snaking up through hillsides densely textured with ancient, silver-leafed olive trees and fragrant citrus groves heavy with late-season fruit. With every meter gained in elevation, the landscape unfolded into more dramatic, panoramic vistas. Majestic Mount Etna presided over the distance, its peak veiled in mist, while the deep sapphire expanse of the Mediterranean stretched relentlessly toward the hazy horizon. Scattered across the precipitous slopes were tiny villages, seemingly stitched onto the rock, clinging to the hillsides as if they had been fixtures since the dawn of time. "Savoca is special," Luca remarked, his voice taking on a respectful tone. "It is profoundly old, very traditional. Most of the younger generation leaves for Palermo or Milan, but the core families remain. They are the keepers of the old ways, the historians. If anyone retains a memory of the Russos, the family who vanished overnight, it will be the people who have never, ever left this mountain." "Do you know anyone who might be one of those keepers?" Gabby asked, her focus sharp. "I do," he confirmed. "My Aunt Maria lives just in the next village. She is 85 years old and has lived her entire life within sight of that mountain. She knows everything. I called her already. She will meet us tomorrow morning." They arrived at Savoca precisely as the sun completed its descent, bathing the village's ancient stone structures in a rich, honeyed golden light. The village was astonishingly small, a compact cluster of perhaps 100 homes built directly into the steep hillside, linked by narrow, tortuous streets barely wide enough to accommodate Luca's car. Dominating the skyline at the very top, the ruined Norman castle stood like a silent, formidable sentinel. Lower down was the famous Bar Vitelli, instantly recognizable to fans, where essential scenes from The Godfather had been immortalized. Luca had secured her a room in a modest but charming guesthouse operated by an elderly woman named Signora Battaglia. The room itself was Spartan but immaculately clean, offering a priceless view. A window overlooking the dark, sprawling valley and the deep blue shimmer of the distant sea. "For tonight you rest," Luca instructed. "Tomorrow the Real work begins. I have already contacted a few of the Vecchi, the old-timers here. They might retain fragmented memories of Lucia's family. We will speak to them and see what threads we can pull." Later that evening, after the Sicilian darkness had completely swallowed the valley, Gabby called Nico. It was still the early, busy afternoon back in Boston, and his voice, when he finally answered, was immediately warm, thick with palpable relief. "You made it." "I made it," she confirmed. "Luca met me, and we are safely installed in Savoca now." "What is your first impression?" "It's breathtaking," she said, gazing out the window at the dark, silent contours of the hills, "and profoundly remote. It feels genuinely like stepping back in time, maybe 100 years. I can understand now why Nonna misses it so deeply, Gabby continued. There is a soul to this place. It feels like home in a visceral way that no city ever manages to replicate. Be careful tomorrow, Nico insisted, the editor's protective instinct kicking in. Stick with Luca. Promise me you won't wander off alone into the village. I promise. She paused, then changed the subject to the one thing that truly mattered back home. Did you see your family this week? Sunday dinner, of course, he replied. Nonna asked exactly where you were. I told her you were visiting family for a few days. He sighed, a low sound over the transatlantic connection. She gave me a look that confirmed she knew I was absolutely lying, but thankfully, she chose not to push it. She is far too smart for her own good. She is too smart for everyone's good, Nico corrected softly. His voice then dropped, becoming intimate. I miss you, Gabs. I miss you too, she whispered back. But if this works, if I can actually find this book, it will be worth this frantic trip. And if I can't, she conceded, trying to manage expectations, then at least I tried my best. Sometimes that is truly the most that anyone can do. They shared another 30 minutes of easy conversation before Gabby finally forced herself to terminate the call and seek some much-needed sleep. Tomorrow, the true, arduous search would finally begin. Luca arrived the following morning with the rising sun, bearing a potent, thick espresso and a bag of fresh, sugar-dusted cornetti acquired from the local bakery. Aunt Maria expects us at 10 o'clock, he announced. Until then, I thought we should wander the village, walking the narrow streets. We need to look at the architecture, see if any of these ancient homes match what little you know of Nonna's family history. They began their exploration. Gabby constantly took mental notes and discrete photographs, attempting to overlay Nonna's fragmented memories onto the tangible reality of the stone houses. Most were clearly lived in, laundry hanging from balconies, flower pots overflowing. But others stood silent and mournful, empty shells with dark, dusty windows and massive wooden doors sealed by thick, green rusted padlocks. How do we possibly narrow down which one was theirs? Gabby finally asked, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of possibilities. Luca merely shrugged, a deeply Sicilian gesture. We ask. We always ask. He stopped abruptly in front of a tiny, well-maintained house where an elderly man sat enjoying the morning warmth, placidly smoking a pipe. Luca immediately launched into a rapid, conversational torrent of Sicilian dialect, a language too swift and dense for Gabby to follow. Yet, she managed to catch the crucial anchor words. Russo, Lucia, America, Santa Ani, the year the ship sailed, Santa Annie, 60 years. The old man's eyes, initially clouded, suddenly sparked with intense recognition. He started speaking animatedly, gesturing with his pipe toward a specific route, pointing emphatically toward a cluster of houses near the summit of the village. Luca listened patiently, asking a few more targeted questions before turning back to Gabby, his face alight with quiet triumph. He remembers them, the Russo family. Says they lived in the large, sturdy stone house just by the old village fountain. The father was a renowned builder here, and the mother, he claims she made the finest bread in the entire valley. They departed in 1965 with their daughter, Lucia, shortly after she married Giuseppe Moretti. He confirms the house has been empty for decades, but he is certain it is still structurally sound. Gabby's heart surged against her ribs, a violent, hopeful kick. Can we see it? Right now? They thanked the old man, who waved them off with a nod, and immediately began the steep ascent up the narrow, winding street. The house they found was immediately imposing, larger than the surrounding cottages. It was a sturdy two-story structure of heavily weathered, sun-bleached stone, capped with a sturdy roof of faded red tiles. All the heavy wooden windows were secured behind massive shutters, and the main entrance was sealed with a padlock, thick and green with the rust of decades. It has been completely abandoned for years, Luca observed, testing the immense lock with a futile tug. But look how strong the structure is. It is sound. If that book was indeed left here, secured inside, it might have survived perfectly. Can we get inside? Gabby asked, her voice barely a whisper. Legally? Legally? Luca repeated with a classic Sicilian scoff. Probably not. However, he glanced around the deserted street, then gave Gabby a slow, conspiratorial smile. I know exactly who handles the paperwork and the keys for the empty properties in this area. Give me 1 hour, no more. He left Gabby standing alone before the imposing facade. She stared up at the tightly shuttered windows. This was the exact spot where Nonna Lucia had spent her childhood. This was where she had learned the precise art of cooking from her mother, where she had nervously married Nico's grandfather, Giuseppe. And this was the place where, in a moment of panicked departure, she had been forced to leave behind a vital, irreplaceable piece of her own history. Gabby reached out and reverently touched the rough, cool stone. She felt the palpable weight of years, the accumulated stories, the laughter, the sorrow, and the lives lived and abruptly abandoned within these thick, silent walls. Precisely an hour later, Luca returned. He was accompanied by a frail, elderly woman dressed impeccably in solemn black, clutching a massive, antique iron key. This is Signora Rossi, Luca introduced quietly. She is the village record keeper, the keeper of all the empty places. I explained everything about the book, about Nonna Lucia's story. She is granting us precisely 1 hour to search. Signora Rossi's hands trembled slightly as she inserted the ancient iron key into the padlock. The lock sprung open, and the heavy wooden door groaned agonizingly on its old hinges, swinging inward to release a 60-year accumulation of cold air, stale dust, and the heavy scent of deep abandonment. Inside, the air was frigid, the light non-existent. Furniture still stood sentinel in the gloom. A heavy, dark wooden table, straight-backed chairs, a large credenza pressed against one damp wall. Everything was coated beneath a thick, uniform blanket of decades-old dust. Yet the contents were remarkably undisturbed. Whoever had fled this home had done so in desperate haste, leaving it fully furnished, as if they intended to return the very next week. Upstairs, Gabby commanded, her voice barely steady. Nonna's precise instructions echoed in her mind. The mother kept the book in the kitchen, but during the frantic packing, she brought it upstairs to wrap it safely. They ran out of time, out of space in the trunks. It was left in her mother's bedroom. They climbed the narrow, creaking stairs with extreme caution. The upper floor contained 2 compact bedrooms and a minuscule bathroom. Gabby headed straight for the larger room, dominated by a wrought iron bed frame, a massive wardrobe, and a chest of drawers. She started with the dresser, pulling open the drawers one by one. Linens, stiff and yellowed, musty old clothes, nothing. The wardrobe yielded more clothes and a few small cardboard boxes filled with faded photographs that instantly made Gabby's heart ache. Pictures of a young Nonna smiling next to a man who had to be her father. Nonna's mother in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour. Still no book. Gabby finally turned her attention to the small, forgotten items atop the dresser. An empty wooden jewelry box, a small ceramic dish. Pushed far toward the back, obscured by shadows, was something rectangular and solid, shrouded entirely in faded fabric. Gabby's hands began to shake violently as she reached for it. The fabric was rough, old linen, deeply yellowed with age. She carefully peeled back the layers. And there it was, brown leather, a distinct water-stained corner, roughly the size of a standard hardcover novel. The book. Oh my God! She whispered, the air catching in her throat. Is that it? Is that the book? Luca asked. Gabby opened the cover with fingers so unsteady they could barely manage the brittle paper. Inside, written in fading, elegant ink, was a name. Caterina Russo. Below that, Sophia Russo. And below those, a meticulous record of names stretching back through generations, precisely as Nonna had described. The interior pages were a rich mosaic of careful script. They documented generations of family knowledge. Secret recipes for feasts and everyday meals, natural remedies for ailments, household notes, and meticulous family records, births, deaths, and marriages chronicled in precise, careful penmanship. The handwriting subtly shifted throughout the volume, revealing where different women had inherited the keeper role. adding their own knowledge and wisdom. In the very back, pressed flat between the pages like fragile memories, Gabby found dried wildflowers, a tiny, impossibly small lock of baby hair tied with a faded ribbon, and a preserved pressed leaf. It wasn't just a ledger. It was a physical embodiment of a family's entire history, preserved meticulously in ink, botanical specimens, and loving, careful record-keeping. It had been waiting here, untouched and silent, for 60 long years. "We found it," Gabby finally said, the rush of emotion cracking her voice. "Luca, we actually found the impossible thing." "Impossible?" Signora Rossi breathed, moving closer, her eyes wide with shock. 60 years abandoned, and it survived the dust and the mice. She crossed herself slowly. "Madonna." Gabby rewrapped the precious volume tenderly in the old linen, then immediately secured it again within a silk scarf pulled from her shoulder bag. This was Nonna's legacy, her mother's voice, her grandmother's accumulated wisdom. This was the entire history she had sacrificed when she left Sicily with only 2 small suitcases and a desperate hope for the future. And now, miraculously, it was finally going home. They thanked Signora Rossi profusely. Luca attempted to offer her payment for her time, but she refused, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "That book belongs with Lucia," she insisted fiercely. Tell her that Savoca remembers. Tell her we remember her mother's beautiful bread and her father's honest work. Tell her she is welcome, always welcome, to come home." Back at the modest guest house, Gabby treated the book like a priceless artifact. She carefully layered it deep inside her suitcase, cushioning it meticulously with layers of clothing for maximum protection. Recognizing its fragility and immense value, she spent the remainder of the afternoon undertaking obsessive archival precautions, photographing every single page, backing up the massive image files to the cloud, and even printing high-resolution copies at a tiny, bewildered local print shop. She needed assurance that if the physical book were somehow damaged, the words themselves would endure. That night she called Nico again. "I found it." A deafening silence stretched across the line. "Wait, what?" "The book. I found Nonna's book." It was exactly where she described. Wrapped in old fabric, left forgotten in her mother's bedroom. 60 years, Nico, and it survived. "Gabby." His voice was suddenly thick, rough with overwhelming emotion. "You actually did it. You found the impossible thing." "I found it," she confirmed, the reality finally hitting her, and tears began to stream uncontrollably down her face. "Nico, you have to see it. It's her entire family history, bound together. Recipes in her mother's distinctive handwriting, detailed notes from her grandmother, births and deaths logged all the way back to the early 1800s. She choked back a sob. "There are pressed flowers in the back. A tiny, ribbon-tied lock of baby hair, maybe Nonna's, maybe a sibling's. It's everything. It is her history. You are giving my grandmother her history back for Christmas," he whispered, his own voice cracking under the weight of the realization. "Gabby, I literally have no words. This is beyond anything I could have ever hoped for." He paused, steadying his breath. "She is going to cry. I have seen Nonna Lucia cry maybe twice in my entire adult life. And she is going to absolutely fall apart when you give her this. Good tears, I hope? The very best tears. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Tears that acknowledge you have given her back something she thought was utterly lost forever." He took a deep breath. "When are you finally coming home?" "Tomorrow is my last full day here. I need to spend one more dedicated hour in the house. See if there is anything else that should come back with me. Then I fly home Thursday. I'll pick you up at the airport." "You don't have to." "I am picking you up," he interrupted firmly. "And then we are going straight back to my apartment, and I am not letting you out of bed for 24 hours straight. Because you just pulled off the single most incredible feat, and I need to show you, properly, exactly how much I love you." Gabby laughed through the lingering tears. "I will absolutely hold you to that promise." The following day, with Luca assisting and Signora Rossi's full, heartfelt permission, Gabby conducted a deeper, more systematic search of the abandoned house. She discovered a trove of forgotten photographs, preserved in dusty cardboard boxes, Images of Nonna as an infant, as a giggling young girl, and finally radiant as a bride. There were pictures of her parents and grandparents, candid shots of chaotic, joyous family gatherings. Most strikingly, tucked away in an antique trunk, she found her mother's delicate wedding dress, carefully wrapped. There were other precious small items: a christening gown, an old man's engraved pocket watch, a beautiful woman's delicate gold bracelet. These were the things the Russo family had intended to return for, the treasures that had been cruelly left behind in the rush of emigration. "Take what you can possibly carry," Signora Rossi insisted, watching Gabby pack with sad, knowing eyes. "These possessions belong to Lucia. The house will remain empty whether these things are here or not. It is far better that they return to the family that needs them." Gabby packed with meticulous care. The photographs, the small, enduring pieces of jewelry, the christening gown, heirlooms Nonna could present to her children and grandchildren, tangible fragments of lost history. But she knew the book, carefully secured and protected, was the undeniable treasure. That was the piece that held the profound, irreplaceable significance. On Thursday morning, Luca drove her the hour back down the winding roads to Catania. At the airport, his goodbye was profound. He hugged her tight, a genuine embrace. "You accomplished a great thing, Gabriella. Nico is fortunate to have you. The whole family is incredibly lucky to have you among them now." "I am the lucky one to have them," Gabby countered sincerely. "Thank you for every single thing. I truly could not have done this without your help." "Tell Nonna Lucia I said hello," he requested, "and tell her Savoca remembers her." "I will." The flight back across the Atlantic felt interminably long, yet Gabby barely registered the time or the distance. Her mind was fixed entirely on Christmas Eve, replaying the moment she would place the carefully wrapped package into Nonna's hands, imagining the expression on her face when the realization dawned. Nico was waiting at the arrival's gate, an impossible beacon of familiar comfort, looking ruggedly handsome in jeans and his leather jacket. The moment his eyes found hers, he surged forward, pulling her into an intense embrace and kissing her with a passion that suggested they had been separated for months, not mere days. "You found it," he repeated, the words a husky murmur against her hair, still tasting of disbelief and awe. "I found it," she confirmed. She pulled back slightly to look into his face. "And there is so much more. Photographs, some jewelry, her mother's wedding dress. Things that must come home to the family." "You are incredible," he declared, kissing her again, more fiercely this time. "Absolutely, utterly incredible." He took her carry-on bag. "Come on, let's go home. We have 3 frantic weeks until Christmas Eve, and I intend to hear every single detail of how you managed to pull off this magnificent impossibility." Once back at his apartment, Gabby reverently unpacked the book. She gently showed Nico the pages, the varied handwritings, the perfectly preserved pressed flowers. Nico spent long moments reading the recipes meticulously chronicled by his great-great-grandmother, tracing his finger over the names and dates recorded in the delicate, fading ink. "This is my history," he whispered, a profound realization dawning in his eyes. "It is our history, and you physically brought it home." He closed the cover gently. "I truly cannot wait to witness her face when we give this to her. She is going to cry," Gabby predicted, smiling. "And then she is going to hug you, and then she is going to officially declare you family, and you will never, ever be allowed to escape Sunday dinners again." "I don't want to escape," Gabby asserted, her voice firm and honest. "I want all of it. The dinners, the large, chaotic family, the noise. I want truly to belong." "You already belong," he assured her, pulling her close into his arms. The instant Nonna said, "Come back next Sunday, you were family." This, he gestured toward the book lying on the table. "This simply seals the deal." Over the course of the next 3 weeks, Gabby dedicated herself to preparation. She located an archival specialist, a professional restorer, who accepted the book and handled it with the exquisite care due to such an irreplaceable treasure, cleaning and stabilizing the leather and paper. She had all the fragile photographs digitized and printed onto archival quality paper, ensuring their longevity. Finally, she packaged everything: the book, The gown, the jewelry, the new prints, carefully within a beautiful, sturdy presentation box, wrapping it meticulously in creamy white paper secured with a thick, luxurious burgundy ribbon. She maintained absolute silence regarding the trip to the Moretti family. At the subsequent Sunday dinners, Gabby smiled. She cooked alongside Francesca, and she listened intently to Nonna's expansive, familiar stories, holding the enormous secret tightly within her. Nico watched her throughout these dinners, his eyes brimming with a shared secret, pride, and deep, profound love, fully aware of the miracle she had accomplished and the staggering gift she was poised to give his grandmother. Christmas Eve finally dawned, cold and brilliantly clear. The exterior of the Moretti house was a glorious display of twinkling lights and thick green garland. Inside, the air was heavy and intoxicating, permeated by the rich, complex aroma of the traditional Sicilian Christmas Eve dinner, the famed Feast of the Seven Fishes, which seemed to linger in every corner and hallway. Gabby had chosen a deep, elegant red dress, her hair pinned neatly up, the heavy, cream-wrapped package waiting securely inside her large bag. She was consumed by a nervous energy, a tension more acute than she had felt even on that terrifying first Sunday she met Nonna. This moment was different. This gift, this gesture, it carried historical weight. It all mattered intensely. The house overflowed with life. Every member of Nico's extended family was present, reinforced by a boisterous contingent of aunts, uncles, and countless cousins. The immense dining table groaned audibly under the weight of platters piled high with seafood. Salted bacala, crisp fried calamari, steamed shrimp, clams, mussels, tiny fried smelts, and massive bowls of pasta tossed with sardines and fennel. Wine flowed freely. The conversation was loud, relentless, and joyous, punctuated by the excited shrieks of children who ran incessantly between rooms, fueled by the manic anticipation of Christmas morning. Following the feast, the entire assembly migrated to the living room for the highly anticipated gift exchange. The Christmas tree was truly massive, a towering evergreen dense with ornaments, each piece a carefully preserved artifact telling a generation of family history. Presents were piled high beneath the branches, wrapped in every conceivable bright color and pattern. The children tore into their packages first, their joy unrestrained and chaotic. Then the adults moved into their rounds, exchanging mostly practical gifts, interspersed with the occasional gag gift or a small, meaningful treasure. Gabby distributed her gifts. A beautiful, intricately woven scarf she had picked up in a small Taormina shop for Francesca. A well-researched book on Sicilian history for Antonio. Thoughtful, carefully selected items for the siblings and cousins. Finally, when the flurry of wrapping paper had subsided, covering the floor like colorful, crumpled snow, and most of the packages were opened, Gabby reached into her bag. She pulled out the solemn, cream-wrapped box. "Nonna," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, yet quiet enough to draw attention. "I have something just for you." The vast, noisy room fell into an immediate, profound silence. Every head turned, focusing intently on Gabby, on Nonna, and most importantly, on the package, which seemed to possess an unnatural gravity for its size. Nonna sat placidly in her favored armchair beside the massive Christmas tree, seeming smaller, more delicate than usual in the soft light reflecting off the ornaments. "For me, Gabriella? You truly didn't have to get me anything at all." "I wanted to," Gabby replied simply. She crossed the crowded room, knelt gracefully beside Nonna's chair, and held out the box. "Buon Natale, Nonna." Nonna accepted the package with hands that were instantly cautious, almost reverent, studying the box intensely as if she could divine its history through touch alone. Slowly, methodically, she pulled away the rich cream paper. The box was opened, and nestled within the tissue, the unmistakable object emerged. A brown leather book, clearly ancient, with a distinctive, preserved water-stained corner. Nonna went perfectly, profoundly still. Her hands began to tremble uncontrollably as she lifted the volume, her breathing shallow. She opened the cover, her eyes fixed on the name written inside. Caterina Russo. "No," she whispered, the sound impossibly faint. This cannot be. This is not how it happens. She immediately pressed the book to her heart, clutching it fiercely, closing her eyes. Gabby watched, transfixed, as two large, heavy tears managed to slip down the deep creases of Nonna's weathered cheeks. The entire room remained in absolute, stunned silence. Nonna's lips moved, forming words in rapid Sicilian dialect too soft for Gabby to decipher, an outpouring of 60 years of emotion. Then, louder, her voice shattering with overwhelming feeling, she asked the question everyone was holding their breath for. How did you find this? Gabby gently took Nonna's free hand, holding it tight. I went to Savoca. I found your house, and your mother's book was there, waiting in her bedroom, exactly where she had wrapped it before you left Sicily. You went to Sicily? Nonna stared at her, her eyes now completely flooded with tears. You flew all the way to Savoca, to this forgotten place, just to find this? Yes. But why? Nonna cried, the word heartbroken. Why would you do such a thing for me? Because you told me the story, Gabby responded, her own voice beginning to break with the shared emotion. Because I understood exactly how much it meant to you. Because I wanted, more than anything, to give you back a piece of what you lost. Gabby's own tears finally spilled over. Because you are family, Nonna. And family protects family. Family brings each other back home. Nonna pulled Gabby into a fierce, desperate embrace. The precious book was pressed tightly between them as Nonna sobbed into Gabby's shoulder, a profound release of 6 decades of suppressed grief. All around them, the large family watched, utterly stunned. Francesca was openly weeping. Antonio's eyes were suspiciously wet and red. Nico stared at Gabby with an expression of pure, magnificent devotion, looking as though she had single-handedly lassoed the moon and presented it as a gift. When Nonna finally managed to pull back, she cupped Gabby's face firmly with both hands, the book still clutched defensively to her chest. 60 years, Nonna murmured, the words heavy with disbelief. 60 years I believed it was lost forever. 60 years I mourned this connection. This piece of my mother, my Nana, my family. And you, Gabriella, you brought it home. There is more, Gabby added softly. She presented the other items. The boxes of photographs, the small pieces of jewelry, the delicate christening gown. These were all in the house, too. They belong with you. Nonna looked at the photographs, her hands shaking as they held images of her parents, impossibly young and smiling. Herself as a baby, her own wedding day. She touched her mother's gold bracelet as if it were forged from starlight. How? She asked again, utterly bewildered. How did you achieve this? Nico's cousin, Luca, helped immensely. And the village record keeper, Signora Rossi. She remembered your family immediately. She asked me to tell you that Savoca remembers you, and that you are always welcome to come home. Nonna collapsed into renewed tears. Francesca swiftly moved to her mother's side, wrapping a supportive arm around her shoulders. The entire family closed in, gathered tightly around the woman, examining the book, the photographs, the stunning treasures that had made their impossible return after 60 silent years. And through it all, Nonna held the book tight to her heart, gazing at Gabby as though she had performed a genuine miracle, which, in the eyes of the Moretti family, she absolutely had. Much later, after the initial storm of tears had passed, the gifts had been universally admired, and the family had settled into the quiet intimacy of late-night conversation. Nonna took Gabby's hand. Come, she instructed, leading her away from the crowded living room and into the warm, familiar quiet of the kitchen. Just the two of them, finally alone. Nonna placed the book gently on the large kitchen table, opened it carefully, and began to slowly run her aged fingers over the faded, loving script of her mother's handwriting. This is my mother's voice, she finally breathed, her voice a fragile whisper barely audible above the city's quiet hum. Her fingers, gnarled and strong from a lifetime of kneading dough, traced the faded script. These are her hands, her accumulated wisdom, her boundless love. I had lived decades believing I had lost it all forever. When she passed away, I believed that beautiful voice, that essence, was irrevocably gone. But you, Gabriella, you brought it back. She looked up at Gabby, her dark eyes, usually so sharp and teasing, now fierce with profound gratitude. You gave me my mother back for Christmas. I just found the book. Nana. Nonna shook her head, her hand gripping Gabby's tightly, a reassuring anchor. No, you did so much more than that, Kara. You listened when I told that fragmented story months ago. You cared enough, deeply enough, to hold that memory. You traveled thousands of miles across an ocean to find something that every sensible person would have declared impossible to locate. You performed this tireless act not because you were obligated to, not because anyone demanded it of you, but because you possess a good heart and you truly understood the gravity of what this book meant to me. She squeezed Gabby's hand again, emphasizing the weight of her words. That is love, Gabriella. That is the true meaning of family. That is what it means to belong here. I do want to belong, Gabby whispered, the words trembling with emotion. To this family, to you, to all of it. You already do. Nonna pulled her close again, holding her tight, then kissed both her cheeks in the traditional, formal Sicilian way. First the left, then the right. Before tonight, you were Nico's girlfriend, someone interesting we were enjoying getting to know. Now you are family, Gabriella. You are my granddaughter. Understood? Yes, Nana. Good. Nonna released her, though her hand lingered on Gabby's arm, and she turned back to the book resting on her lap. Now, tomorrow you come for Christmas dinner, and I teach you my mother's recipe for cassata. It's right here. She pointed to a specific page, the ingredients listed in meticulous, looping script. We will make it together, you and me, and I will tell you the stories that are intrinsically linked to the steps, because that is the custom of the Moretti women. We pass on the recipes, the histories, the unconditional love. From mother to daughter, from Nonna to granddaughter. Gabby's eyes immediately filled with the sting of tears. I'd love that. Then, a sense of peace, a certainty she hadn't known before, settled deep within her chest. Nonna gently closed the weathered ledger, the brown leather cool beneath her touch, and pressed it tight against the place where her heart held secrets. Her eyes, still shining with residual tears, locked onto Gabby's. Grazie, Gabriella, she murmured, the Sicilian term for gratitude weighted with generations of meaning. Asterisk grazie mille. Asterisk you have given me the greatest gift I could ever hope to receive. When they returned to the boisterous living room, Nico was waiting, a look of focused intensity on his face. He pulled Gabby instantly into the safe harbor of his arms, burying his face in her hair. You made my formidable grandmother cry happy tears. You brought her mother's voice back to life. You performed an actual, verifiable miracle tonight. I just found a book. You did so much more than that, Bella. You gave her back her history. You gave her back the foundation of her family. You showed her that the things that matter the most haven't been permanently lost. That the things of the heart can be found again if someone cares enough to look for them. He kissed her temple, a long, sweet press of his lips. I love you more fiercely and completely than I can possibly express. I love you too. The remaining hours of the Christmas Eve vigil unwound like a spool of precious, delicate thread. The living room slowly emptied as families collected sleepy children, exchanging loud, affectionate goodbyes and promises of tomorrow's feast. But before Nico and Gabby could make their own departure, Nonna summoned them both over with a sharp, decisive gesture. She was still holding the book, cradling it carefully. She would probably hold it all night. Nico, she said, her voice resonant with finality. You found a good one, a keeper. Do not let her get away. I won't, Nonna. I promise you. Good. Nonna turned to Gabby, her expression immediately softening. And you, Christmas dinner tomorrow at 1 o'clock sharp. Do not dare be late. We have cassata to craft and essential stories to share. I'll be here, Nonna. I know you will. Because your family now, Gabriella, and family always comes home. Christmas morning dawned over Boston. A soft, muted affair ushered in by weak winter sunlight that struggled to penetrate the panes of Nico's bedroom window. Gabby woke slowly, drawn from sleep not by an alarm, but by the rich, comforting scent of brewing coffee. Nico appeared in the doorway moments later, carrying 2 steaming mugs, wearing nothing but his sleep pants and an utterly irresistible smile. "Merry Christmas, Bella," he said, setting the coffee on the nightstand and climbing back into bed beside her, pulling her against his warmth. "How does it feel to be an official, fully inducted member of the esteemed Moretti family?" "Terrifying and wonderful," she admitted, curling deeper into his embrace. "Your grandmother called me her granddaughter, because that's exactly what you are now. There's no possibility of going back, Gabby. You understand the rules. Sunday dinners are mandatory. Holidays are non-negotiable. Nonna will expect you at every single family function for the remainder of your life." "Good." She traced her fingers along the strong expanse of his chest, delighting in the feel of his skin. "I don't want to go back. I want all of it. The organized chaos, the demanding expectations, the impossible standards she sets for making fresh pasta. Every last bit of it. Even when Nonna decides that you and I should finally get married and starts peppering you with pointed questions about grandchildren every single Sunday lunch." Gabby's heart gave a fierce kick against her ribs. Is she going to do that? Probably. Starting today. Nico's hand found hers, his fingers immediately lacing through hers, the connection instant and familiar. Would that be so terrible if she did? Asking about grandchildren before we're even engaged? A little premature, I'd say. I meant the engagement part. She went utterly still, the warmth of the coffee forgotten. "Nico, I'm not asking. Not yet. Not today." He turned fully to face her, his dark eyes serious and deeply committed. "But I am telling you now that I am going to ask you very soon. Because you just gave my grandmother the single most incredible gift anyone has ever given her. And you did it because you possess a beautiful heart and you love this family. My family." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles reverently. "And I love you more than I knew it was possible to love any person. So yes, very soon I am going to ask you to marry me. And I'm planning on you saying yes." The inevitable rush of tears pricked behind Gabby's eyes. "You're planning on it. I'm a Moretti. We don't do anything important without a comprehensive plan. What if my plan is dramatically different than yours? Is it?" He searched her face intently, reading her hesitation and her certainty. "Because if you aren't ready, if you truly need more time, tell me now and I will wait. I'll wait as long as you require, Gabby, but if you are ready, if you want this family and this life and me forever, then don't make me wait longer than necessary." "I'm ready," she whispered, the last vestige of fear dissolving. "I've been ready since the moment you first asked me to dinner 6 months ago, and I said no because I was scared of exactly this. Scared of wanting you so much it felt like a terrifying freefall. Scared of wanting to belong to your family so intensely that I'd fly halfway to Sicily to find an impossible book." She looked him directly in the eye, the tears now flowing freely. "I'm ready, Nico. Whenever you ask, the answer is yes." He kissed her then. A kiss slow and deep and overflowing with promises they didn't even need to speak aloud. "Good, because the ring is already made. My grandmother's emerald, a significant stone, reset in a new, elegant setting. Nonna gave it to me last month. She said she'd been saving it for the precise moment I found the right woman. She knew before I did that I was it. She knew before I even met you. Nonna has a preternatural gift for these things. She took one look at you that first Sunday dinner and saw forever." His smile was soft and genuine. "Just like I did." They stayed nestled in bed for another hour, talking about the concrete details of the future, about wedding plans and family expectations and the comfortable, chaotic life they'd build together. Then Gabby reluctantly pulled away to get ready for the day's main event, Christmas dinner. 1 o'clock. Nana said I can't be late. Nico laughed, the sound deep and rich. "You're making cassata with her. That's essentially a sacred religious ritual. If you were late, she might disown you before officially adopting you." At exactly 1 p.m., Gabby arrived at the Moretti house, carrying a well-chosen bottle of good wine and wearing an apron Nonna had given her weeks ago. A deep red cotton with intricate white embroidery, clearly handmade by an expert. Nico came with her but was immediately banished. Basta. Nico. Go watch football with your father and your cousins, Nonna said firmly, shooing him toward the noise of the living room. This is women's work. Gabriella stays with me. In the vast, stainless steel kitchen, Nonna had already laid out the necessary ingredients with the precision of a chemist. Ricotta cheese, jewel-toned candied fruit, pistachios, sponge cake, and the Italian liqueur striga. The book sat open on the counter, protected by a clean towel, her mother's recipe displayed in the beautiful, faded ink. My mother, Caterina, made the finest cassata in all of Savoca, Nonna said, touching the page gently with her fingertip. She learned from her mother, who learned from her mother before her. The core recipe does not change. Only the love passes down. She looked meaningfully at Gabby. Now you learn, and someday you will teach your daughter, and she will teach hers. This is how the family continues. They work together for hours side by side. Nonna directed with stern, efficient grace. Gabby followed, both of them reading the precise instructions recorded in Caterina Russo's careful handwriting. Nonna told stories as they cooked, about her mother teaching her this exact recipe when she was 15, about making cassata for her own wedding feast. She spoke of the very last time she'd made it in Sicily, the week before she and her young husband left for America. I was so terrified, Nonna admitted, mixing the ricotta and sugar with strong, sure movements. 23 years old, leaving everything I knew, crossing the ocean to a foreign land. But my mother told me, you carry us with you, Lucia. Our recipes, our stories, our love. You take Sicily to America and you keep it alive. And you did. I did. I taught Francesca and she taught Gianna. But I always wondered what was truly lost. The small recipes I forgot. The details my mother would have instinctively remembered. Now, she touched the book again. Now I have her voice again. I can remember it all. They assembled the cassata in careful, meticulous layers. Sponge cake soaked in the fragrant liqueur, followed by the creamy ricotta filling studded with candied fruit and bright green pistachios. More cake, more filling. When the structure was complete, Nonna covered it with a smooth, glossy coat of marzipan and decorated the top with candied cherries and delicate strips of orange peel. Beautiful, she said, stepping back to admire their collaborative work. My mother would be proud of this. You have good hands, Gabriella. Patient hands. That is essential for a good cook. Thank you for teaching me, Nonna. Thank you for letting me in. And thank you for bringing my mother back to me. Nonna's hand found Gabby's. She squeezed tightly, a shared current of emotion passing between them. Last night I couldn't sleep. I stayed up reading every page. Her recipes, her small notes. There is one here. She flipped through the book, quickly finding a page detailing the instructions for making a special bread for new mothers. A soft, healing bread with fennel and anise to help with milk production. My mother brought me this specific bread when Francesca was born. I'd forgotten that detail, but seeing the recipe, reading her words, it all returned to me. The smell, the warm taste, her hands kneading the dough. She looked at Gabby, her eyes glistening. You gave me my most precious memories back. You gave me my mother's hands and mine again. Gabby was speechless, able only to hug Nonna tightly and try not to weep all over the beautifully decorated cassata. Dinner that afternoon was loud, joyful, and utterly chaotic. The long table was crowded with multiple generations of family members. Nico sat beside Gabby, his hand resting securely on her knee beneath the tablecloth, his eyes warm with profound love and pride. When the cassata was finally served as the centerpiece dessert, Nonna rose to make a formal speech, a rare occurrence. She spoke about tradition, the sacred bond of family, and the vital importance of passing down recipes and stories. This cassata was made from my mother's recipe, she announced, holding up the book for everyone to see the worn cover. A recipe she learned from her mother and her mother before her. A piece of our history lost to me for 60 years, and brought home to me by Gabriella, who crossed an ocean to find it. She looked at Gabby with fierce, unmistakable affection. This is family. This is love. This is what it means to belong. Everyone raised their glasses in a single roaring toast. Gabby felt tears streaming down her face, but didn't even bother trying to wipe them away. She was home. Truly, completely home. After dinner, the family gathered to look at the photographs Gabby had brought back from Sicily. Pictures of a young Nonna, her parents, her grandparents. The family passed the pictures around carefully, reverently, exclaiming over forgotten details and familiar faces and memories long dormant. "This is my father," Nonna said, pointing to a tall man with gentle, kind eyes. "And my mother here in her kitchen. Look closely, you can see the bread oven in the background. She baked fresh bread every single morning, even in the unbearable summer heat. She always said that fresh bread was the foundation of family life." The stories flowed as freely as the wine and the striga. Stories Nonna had never told before, memories triggered by the tangible photographs and the details hidden in the recipes within the book. The younger generations listened raptly, hearing the full history of their origins for the very first time. Late in the evening, when many guests had departed but the core family remained, Nonna pulled Gabby aside once more. "I have something for you," she said, leading her to the dining room where the book sat in a place of honor. "My mother's wedding bracelet. The one in the small wooden box you brought back from Savoca." She held up a delicate gold bracelet featuring a small cross charm. "This was given to my mother by her own mother on her wedding day. My mother wore it every day until she died. I thought it was lost to time forever. But you found it. You brought it home. It belongs to you, Nana." "No." Nonna pressed the bracelet into Gabby's open palm, closing her fingers around it protectively. "It belongs to family. My mother gave it to me on my wedding day. I gave my own bracelet to Francesca, and now I give this one to you. Nonna, Nico hasn't, we're not engaged yet." Nonna's smile was knowing and utterly certain. "You will be soon enough. My grandson isn't stupid, Gabriella. He knows precisely what he has. So I give you this now, so you fully understand. You're already family. The ring and the wedding, those are wonderful, beautiful formalities. But this," she tapped the bracelet resting in Gabby's hand. "This says you're my granddaughter now and forever." Gabby couldn't speak. She just hugged Nonna tightly and cried, feeling the profound, comforting weight of history and love and absolute acceptance in the delicate gold chain. 3 weeks later, beneath the cold, sharp clarity of a late January evening, Nico led Gabby to the rooftop terrace of his flagship restaurant, overlooking the vast, dark expanse of Boston Harbor. The city spread out below them, a brilliant, glittering tapestry of light. He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I had an entire oration prepared," he began, his breath visible in the frigid air. "Something deeply poetic about how you dismantled my carefully constructed life, how you brought my chaotic family a genuine miracle, how tomorrow is simply unimaginable without you in it. But the truth, Bella, is far simpler than any grand speech." He pulled out a small, dark velvet box. "I love you. I want forever with you. I want Sunday dinners and the family chaos and teaching our daughters how to make cassata from Nonna's sacred book. Marry me, Gabby. Be my wife, my family, my anchor, my home." "Yes," she said, laughing fiercely through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes." The ring was exactly as he described it. Nonna's enormous, deep green emerald set in a vintage, intricate white gold setting, surrounded by small, glittering diamonds. It caught the city lights and glowed with the weight of the history it carried. "Nonna said this ring has been waiting for you," Nico said, sliding it onto her finger. "She said it knew its rightful owner the moment she saw you walk into the kitchen. I'm starting to think your grandmother is magic. I am certain of it." He pulled her close, kissing her with the intensity of relief and commitment, the city and the stars as their silent witnesses. "Welcome to forever, Bella," they told the family that Sunday. Nonna took one look at the ring and at their joined, smiling hands and said simply, "Finally. Now we can start planning the wedding." The wedding happened that following June, a massive, vibrant affair that filled the largest Catholic church in the North End and spilled into a joyous reception at Nico's newest restaurant, a stunning space overlooking the water. Gabby wore her future mother-in-law's vintage lace veil and carried a bouquet of flowers the warm color of a Sicilian sunset. Nonna sat in the front row, the book resting securely on her lap, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. At the reception, Nonna gave the final, most anticipated toast. When Nico first brought Gabriella to Sunday dinner, I tested her. I test everyone, that is my right. Most fail immediately. But Gabriella, she didn't just pass my tests. She crossed an entire ocean to give me back a piece of my heart I thought was eternally lost. She brought my mother's voice back to life. She showed me what love looks like when it is real, when it is selfless, and when it is profoundly brave. That is the woman my grandson is marrying. That is the granddaughter I gained. Asterisk salute. Everyone raised their glasses and cried out. Asterisk salute. Asterisk Gabby wept openly, happily. Nico held her close, and Nonna watched with quiet satisfaction. The book still resting on her lap, her mother's wisdom close to her heart. 2 years later, Gabby was 7 months pregnant with their first child. At a regular Sunday dinner, Nonna pulled her aside with proprietary swiftness. Girl or boy? We're not finding out, Gabby said, smiling. We want to be surprised. It's a girl. Nonna said it with complete, chilling certainty. I know these things. And when she's born, we begin teaching her the recipes. My mother's recipes passed down through generations. We'll use the book. Always, Gabby promised. I'll teach her everything you've taught me. Good. Nonna touched Gabby's swollen belly gently, her hands feeling the movement within. You're giving me a great-granddaughter. Another generation to carry the recipes forward. That is the greatest gift, you know. Not the book, though that was miracle enough. But this, she patted Gabby's belly. This is how family continues. This is how love survives the decades. 3 months later, Gabby gave birth to a daughter. They named her Katerina Lucia. Katerina for the great-great-grandmother whose cookbook had brought Gabby into the family. Lucia for the Nonna who had so fiercely and completely accepted her. Nonna held the baby and wept, tears of exhausted joy streaming down her face. She has her eyes. My mother's eyes. Look, Francesca, look at those eyes. And Nonna was right. Little Katerina had the same deep, knowing eyes seen in the faded photographs from Savoca. Eyes like the women preserved in the book, like all the Russo women going back generations. When Katerina was 3, a whirlwind of dark hair and ceaseless energy, she sat on Nonna's lap in the kitchen, while Gabby made the weekly bread from the book's recipe. Nonna read the instructions aloud in her mother's precise handwriting, and Katerina listened with solemn, focused attention. This is your great-great-great-grandmother's recipe, Nonna told her, running a wrinkled finger along the page. Passed down from mother to daughter, daughter to daughter. Someday, Piccola, you will make this bread for your own daughter, and you will remember this exact moment when you were small and I was old, and we read the recipe together. Will you teach me, Nonna? Katerina asked, her voice high and clear. Always, Piccolina. I'll teach you every single thing. Gabby watched them from across the kitchen, kneading the dough, and felt the comforting, immense weight of history, love, and belonging settling around her. She thought about that first Christmas Eve, kneeling beside Nonna's chair, handing her the impossible gift. She thought about Nonna's hands clutching the book, pressing it to her heart. She thought about the whispered question, asterisk, how did you find this? And she thought about the simple answer, the one that still held true years later. Asterisk, because your family, and family brings each other home. The bread began to rise in the sweet, quiet warmth of the kitchen. Katerina giggled at something Nonna said. Nico appeared silently in the doorway, watching his wife and daughter and grandmother, his eyes full of uncomplicated love. And in the center of it all, the book sat open on the counter, brown leather, water-stained corner, filled with recipes and wisdom, and the vibrant voices of women long gone but never forgotten. Home, history, family, all found in a book that had waited 60 years to return exactly where it belonged. All made possible because one woman had listened intently to a story and thought, asterisk, what if I could fix this? Asterisk, and then had crossed an ocean to do exactly that. Years later, when Nonna Lucia passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94, the book was placed reverently on her chest at the wake. At the funeral mass, Francesca read a passage from it, her grandmother Katerina's recipe for comfort soup, the one made specifically for sick children and grieving widows. My mother, Francesca said, her voice breaking slightly, always said the book was her mother's voice. That when Gabby brought it home, she literally brought her mother back to life. And now, she touched the book gently. Now my mother's voice lives in here, too. In the notes she added, the recipes she updated, the fierce love she poured into these pages. This book will pass to Gabriella now, and then to little Katerina, and eventually to her daughters. And through those hands we will all remember. We will remember that love is not fragile. It survives. We will remember that family is not just blood, but a choice, a continuation. That sometimes, the most profound gifts are the ones we had mistakenly filed under impossible to give. After the funeral, Gabby held the book tightly and thought again about a Christmas Eve 3 years prior, about a gift that had seemed mythical, about a question whispered in wonder and tears. Asterisk, how did you find this? She'd found it by listening, by caring, by believing fiercely that some things once tragically lost could still be recovered if someone loved enough to search for them. And in doing so, she'd found infinitely more than a book. She had found a family, a true home, a rich history to pass on, and a love. The kind of enduring love that crosses oceans and survives generations and lives in every recipe, every story, every carefully preserved page. The kind that whispered, asterisk, you belong here, forever. The book sat on the kitchen counter in Gabby and Nico's home now, protected in a special, custom-built wooden case, but taken out every Sunday for the ritual of cooking. Katerina, now 5, knew exactly which recipes were her favorites. She knew the difference between her great-great-great-grandmother's angular handwriting and her own Nonna Lucia's precise notes. And someday she would add her own, because that is what family did. They passed down the recipes, the stories, the love, from mother to daughter, generation to generation, forever. All because one Christmas, a woman had held a worn leather book to her heart and whispered, asterisk, how did you find this? Asterisk, and another woman had answered with the only truth that mattered. Because your family, and family always comes home.